Hey, everybody, welcome to the Optimum Drive podcast presented by the Fast Lane Talk. My name's Paul Gerard, former Top Gear Stig for the USA show. The reason I say that is going to become very obvious in just a minute when I introduce my guest today, who is a world-renowned driver, wrote an amazing, clever book, is a very successful, not only racing driver through his career, but now as a public speaker, going and doing events and engagements for motivational stuff, team building stuff, and just plain entertainment. And with that, I'm so happy to welcome, who I could say a pretty good friend now. We've known each other a while. But the original Stig, the guy that dressed in black for Top Gear UK, ladies and gentlemen, Perry McCarthy. How you doing, Perry?
Oh, we
Hello.
meet.
This is exciting. I have since I ever sort of conceived of the Optimum Drive podcast, you were on the short list of guests that I had to have because I've known you now. We met one time a long time ago, like 2010. You flew out to the US for an event through a mutual friend, Paul Charsley, who and we did an event. I think it was for Honda, and I met you there. And then we sort of, and then during that time, I was actually the Stig. You didn't know it at the time, but you had retired from the role on the UK show. I was doing it on the US show, and then we've sort of been, friends on Facebook and LinkedIn and all of that stuff ever since then. And I've read your book. I read it a long time ago, actually, and such a great read. If you haven't read Flat Broke by Perry McCarthy, make sure you grab that. It is a very, very entertaining read, as you're about to find out, because Perry is a very, very entertaining guy.
Actually, to be honest, the book's going really, really well. We sold another copy just last month.
Oh, that's fantastic. So including the one I bought, let me do the math on this. That's two.
Hang on a second. Karen, you can get the chicken out of the fridge. We can eat tonight. Right.
So this is going to be fun, and this is kind of exciting because I've talked about being the Stig before, and everyone just kind of looks at you sort of puzzled, like this strange existence. So I want to compare notes with what it was like for you to be the Stig, the original Stig, because you basically, as I always refer to you, you're the OG Stig. So you kind of set the tone and probably, the role and the character and who it was, all of that was largely stuff you came up with. So that's definitely a topic. And then your racing stuff, of course, which is super cool. Perry, fought and worked. It's one of those great stories in racing where he did get to Formula One, which is unbelievable. I never did. I tried. I never made it there. Perry actually did it, and he did it with no money, hence the title of his book, Flat Broke. And he did it just through hard work, deal making, determination, being quick on his feet, and I think a kind of a keen intellect in that way as well, where you're able to put these deals together and just make such an impression on people that they would, with very little time knowing you, would trust you and sponsor you to throw you in a car, not realizing you were doing the whole thing on a wing and a prayer.
Yeah, well, trying to find a good sponsor is like trying to find Glenn Miller. It's really difficult. But it's kind of, as you're aware, we kicked off Top Gear in 2002, and my involvement came immediately because it's funny you should mention the book, Paul, because it was actually at my book launch in London. We had a big party. So there was a lot of friends from F1 come, some friends from TV, and one of those friends was Jeremy Clarkson. And it was actually at the book launch that Jeremy said, look, Top Gear's been off air for a real long time, which it had been. We're going to bring it back, and we've got an idea for you. And we want you to be this secret, unnamed, silent racing driver. And as you said, first Stig, all in black. And he said, we want you to wear black shoes, black overalls, black gloves, black crash helmet, a black visor, and we're going to call you the Gimp. And I said, no, you're not. And they were really serious. And I said, no. Look, I've seen Pulp Fiction. Forget it. It's not going to happen. I said, it's a deal breaker. Anyway, they saw the light and come up with the Stig. And I said, okay, that's fine. We'll go with that. And it's amazing. Keeping the character secret really worked because the question of who is the Stig became one of the top 10 questions asked on the internet. I was just behind, is there a God and am I pregnant? It was in that order. But the Stiggy stuff it was good fun, and as you say, it came toward the end of my career in motor racing. And there were some good bits to it. I mean, I'm a racing driver first and foremost, so I liked competing a lot more. But yeah, that's how we kicked it off. And when they described they wanted it secret, I thought, well, okay, we can make this character a little bit meaner, a little bit nastier. And I thought, okay, the Simpson crash of it, that's got this kind of Star Wars look to it. So I thought, okay, we'll have that. It makes it look a little bit otherworldly. So I went and got one. They agreed it. So I said, okay, this is what we'll do. And then the other thing is that I was kind of thinking, most of the time I'm a fairly chatty guy. A lot of the time. No, but actually, I do have moments, quite a lot of them, where I like to be completely quiet and I'm thinking. But if I'm at a track, and especially if it's qualifying or something like that, then there is a responsibility sometimes to be speaking with the team or be speaking with the sponsors, or sometimes, of course, our beloved spectators, fans, etc. But there's a part of you that doesn't want to, because well, that's the way I process stuff anyway, and I don't think I'm unique on that. But so there's this pull and push sometimes because of being human and having some responsibilities, and also hopefully some kind of kindness as well. But the racing driver side of me anyway is way more ruthless than that and just wants to focus. And I thought, well, with Stiggy, he doesn't have to worry about any of that. So just make Stig, it's not that he doesn't care about people, he just doesn't even understand them. He doesn't understand the concept of relationships. And that's what I wanted to try and bring to the party. Just say people can be talking, and I'd just fold my arms and walk off, because it wasn't being in a car. So really, that's the idea that I had, that I wanted to bring to the party, about this creature that only knew everything else was impatient, just bored, or doesn't understand. Just put me behind a steering wheel. So that was the kind of pure racing driver side of it.
Yeah, that all makes absolute perfect sense. And actually, to me, I didn't talk to you before I started playing the character. I'd obviously watched you and watched Top Gear, and that's where I got all my information from. And then the whole anonymity part of it was, they were like, if anyone finds out who you are, you lose the job. So then it was just like, don't talk to anybody. Don't let it, because a lot of it's a small industry, isn't it? So a lot of
they said that to me. It's that Jeremy said, look, you can't tell anybody. So I said, well, we're shaking hands, but I'm not going to tell anybody. I said, actually, Jem, I'm going to have to tell Karen, my wife. And Jem said, no, you can't tell Karen. I said, Jeremy, I'm going to have to tell Karen. He said, no, you can't tell Karen. I said, mate, I'm going to have to. I said, Karen, I'm going to have to tell her. He said, but why? I said, buddy, on a filming day, you try getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, dressed from head to foot in black leather, saying, I'm going out, darling. I should be home around midnight, but nothing's going on. He said, I see your point.
Exactly.
You can tell Karen.
Exactly. So funnily enough, my wife is also named Karen.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And I did tell her as well. And there were 4 people that knew who I was. One was the person writing the checks at the BBC, and one was Tanner Faust, who was one of the hosts, and the other one was my boss, because I needed to get off work so often. And so I kept that circle really tight. But to go back, like, to what you were talking about with the character, that's exactly it. You're right. I mean, I can totally relate to what you were saying about, as a racing driver, you're so intently focused on simply your performance and the car's performance, that you are forced to interact with fans and the team and all of that stuff. There's all these obligations that come along with being at the track and being the driver of a car. But you don't want to do that stuff, because you want to just focus on trying to optimize yourself as a driver.
Well, sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't want to do it. Yeah. Other times it's remarkably easy to, obviously relating with the team is part and parcel of the job, because you're doing that not for a laugh, but you're doing it to try and clearly maximize what you've got under you.
Yeah.
And then it's always a delight to speak to the spectators, but sometimes they don't realize that there is a moment you want to
Yeah.
switch off
When
because
things are
you are
going well,
winding up.
you can chat with them. When the car's not going well, you're like,
Yeah.
ah. But yeah, that's cool. And that's amazing, that it came up from a conversation at your book launch. I think that's I mean, so appropriate and fitting. That's really, really cool. I remember finishing up my book. I was doing this is kind of funny. So when I was finishing writing my book, and I actually shot a little video of me sitting in the car, I was sitting in a Land Rover out at a dry lake bed in California. And I was on my laptop editing the last version of the book before it was published. And I was at the set for the launch of the Grand Tour. And
Oh
so
yeah, really?
I was on set for Grand Tour. I had been doing a bunch of driving. They were, and they're all Jeremy James Richard and Phil Churchwood, was the director of that. And they're all standing in a circle, like right in front of me. I'm in the vehicle. They're just out front of the nose of the vehicle. And I'm tapping away on my laptop going, this is kind of cool. I'm finishing my book while I'm on set for and it was the launch of the Grand Tour. It was the first episode where Jeremy came across and they did the Mustang shoot, which was the first Grand Tour episode. So that there's a little bit more of a connection there, but that's so amazing. I mean, so what else? Anything else that was said at the party as far as the launch and the character, or it was just kind of that simple?
No, that was pretty much it. Then we went to the track, and I made some suggestions on the track layout because I think they've done a fairly good job. They've worked with some people, I believe it's from Lotus, on designing the track. But once I got there, I was pretty happy with most of it. But I felt what they were trying to achieve, maybe a couple of small adjustments, which they actually went with. So that was cool.
Cool.
But yeah, actually, I should mention while we're on here, because one of the things that really gets on my nerves is people think that I brought it up about being a Stig in my book. So the your listeners or viewers will hopefully understand that I wrote my book before Top Gear came out,
Right.
because it was a Stig that followed me that then wrote a book all about being the Stig.
That's right. Yeah. And so I think that's an important distinction to anyone watching. So there have been three now, because I mean, I guess we could still say he's current, though they just announced the show was on hiatus for the foreseeable future. So I won't say his name, though I do know him. But Perry McCarthy, the first original Stig, then Ben Collins, the one that was the Stig after you, that, as you said, wrote the tell-all book. And I actually was working on a Top Gear UK episode. They were here in the UK, in the US, Jeremy, James, and Richard, just after that had happened. And by the way, they were so mad at him. Like they were talking about lawsuits and just all these things they were so mad at how he had done it and how unprofessionally he had done it. And so, yeah, that's a good distinction. That was not Perry. That was Ben Collins. Perry.
Well, after I left the show, the second edition of my book came out, and as you kindly said, it was about my journey through motor racing. It's not all about Top Gear. But then after I'd come out and I had permission to do it, I mentioned I was the Stig, but that took up like, I don't know, 3 pages. It was like it was a very visual thing about my career, but my career was coming through motor racing and how I did it. And as you say, getting to Formula One, clearly with a pretty rubbish team, but I got there. I wasn't really able to.
It's one of the great. It is one of the great stories to me, because you didn't show up. You didn't have all this experience. You weren't this karting prodigy with wealthy parents with their eye on the prize, or that it wasn't like that at all. And so I think that's why the book has always resonated, and you've sold those 3 copies that you've sold, because
I think there's interest in a 4th copy as well. Actually, somebody told me they might buy one in the future. So
that's Christmas could
actually,
come early.
I think I think in total, I'm not completely sure, but I think it's about 160, 170,000 copies it's sold
That's
now.
amazing. That's
So
amazing.
it's not bad. But I think that I don't know. It's difficult sometimes to talk about yourself without sounding flash or proud, because I would never use the word proud about what I do. I recognize things that I do. I recognize things that I've done. But for me, sadly, and it's not a great thing to say, but nothing's ever really quite good enough. That's how I feel genuinely. I always feel
Oh,
there was more to be done, or there is more to be done, or how can I do this better? And sometimes I think, oh, okay, not bad, but not perfect. I think from all the laps I've ever done, definitely haven't ever done a perfect lap. I might have been, funny enough, it was probably in the States. I've been was close, probably, but you're never going to get a perfect lap. But I always look at everything like that. But you can drive yourself nuts. So I think that's where my sense of humor probably was a protective mechanism to come in. And when I first kicked off to get the money together to even come in, after deciding I want to be a racing driver, and then realizing that there's a small word with a big meaning, beginning with M, ending with honey. So how do you get the money to even start? And you're right, without parents or family connections that can do that. So I went to work on oil rigs. And these oil rigs were in the North Sea, which is not the loveliest place in the world. And that was 2.5 years out there to get the money together to start. But when I did, when I did start, it was kind of the difficulty was that you're coming straight in against, some lads who had really been karting and stuff since they were quite young. So they've been through national championships and international championships. And now you're coming at kind of seasoned professionals as I'm coming in to start motor racing at 21. Now, that was pretty late. And the moment I started, I was pretty quick, to be quite frank. But Bernie Ecclestone happened to be at Brands Hatch, and somebody took me along and introduced me to him. And he looked at me, he said, son, you're 21 years old, you've got no money, you've got no experience, your chances of getting to Formula One are about 1,000,000 to 1. And every time I tell that story, I sound more and more like Michael Caine, right?
You do sound a bit like Michael Caine.
Michael Caine, and it always points, right? But so all I could think of was, wow, I've just kicked off and I've just met Bernie Ecclestone.
That's it.
So that was silly as a bunch of lights to think like that. But it was...
You know the scene from Dumb and Dumber, right? Where he gets told, not if you were the last man on earth. And his response is, so I've got a shot.
Exactly.
So that's exactly how you think. You're like, he didn't say I couldn't. He just said it was going to be impossible. And to people with this type of mindset, because I'm exactly with you on this story, like this is my progression through racing as well. I'm just like, that's a challenge, like challenge accepted. Like, okay, Bernie, I'm going to prove to you.
No, but the God's honest truth is, sorry to interrupt, Paul, but the God's honest truth is, I actually didn't think like that because it didn't register as a challenge from him or anybody else. It was in my head. It was all about, no, it was about me. Can I do it? And I must admit, I'm not sure if I'm correct on this, but I think I am. I don't think I'm terribly competitive as a person, even as a racing driver. Because if the people I was against was, Damon Hill and Johnny Herbert, Mark Blundell, Marty Brundle, etc., etc., etc. And if they went and did something, I thought, okay, fine. The person I was competitive against was actually me, because I can't really control what they do as far as a quali lap's concerned or whatever. So it was about, what can I do? And that was fairly harsh, because I'm on to myself to say further, later, faster. Obviously, I'm stating the obvious, that that's what you have to do to try and come through to get to F1. So again, there was no, I've probably got one quality in life that I would boast about is that I've never been jealous of anybody in my entire life about anything. And that is the God's honest truth. So if somebody got a drive ahead of me, I'd think, damn it, blast. I wish I'd got that drive. But they're in the same business as me. If they beat me to a race drive, okay, well done. Now I wish you good luck because the competition's over. They've won. Or there were occasions when I beat them to a drive kind of thing. So that's how I saw things. But I think it kept me in good stead because there were enough hurdles to clear anyway to keep. Once I kicked off, I pretty much, to be honest, had to win because my oil rig money was only going to last so long. So, and I probably didn't do too bad because I won the British Championship pretty much straight out the box. So that was Formula Ford. So that was, okay, great, big tick box. But all that was the initial platform for a much bigger fight going forward, a much bigger fight.
Yeah.
And then it was a question of going, well, we need a few bucks here. As they say in NASA, no bucks, no Buck Rogers, So that's the deal. You've got to find the money. So unfortunately, I would say most of my time, way more time than going round and round in circles, was spent knocking on doors, chatting people up, trying to convince any company that they've been lucky to survive in business without sponsoring me, And so just to introduce the fun they could have, what we could build around it. And so there's two careers.
Yeah.
There's the one that preferably you would have just said, I'm a racing driver. I don't have to do all that. But it's rubbish because I did. Because without doing all that career, there wasn't going to be the first career.
Right.
So hopefully you get better at both of them. It would have been much better and much purer to just go, I've got all the backing in the world from a family or whatever, whoever, and just completely concentrate on driving and then being with the best team in F3, the best team in 3000, the best team F2, the best team in the States, whatever, to just keep making sure financially that was available to give you the best chance. But most of the time, it's about getting just enough money to get to not a great team, but in the next level. So you said about Dumber and Dumber. I watched, I think it's Rocky Balboa. It's like number 5 or number 6 in the franchise. And Paul, there was a brilliant. I'm actually quite a fan of Sylvester Stallone because everybody thinks, well, he just talks like that and everything. The guy is very bright and very talented. He's a great writer and the things he's made happen. But I'm going around the block here. There was a line that he was having a row with his son and putting his son right in the right.
I know where you're going with this.
In the street, And he said something. He said, "Life is tough, and it's not just how much you can punch or how hard you can punch. It's about how hard you can get punched and still keep moving forward." And I really actually did subscribe to that because that was the key thing was, can you take a whack in the face? Yeah. Can you take 2 or 3? A lot of people can't. Can you take 5, 6 or 7? An awful lot more people can't. Can you take 20, 30, 40 and keep moving forward? So it was either do that or quit. Quitting may have been easier,
Yeah, well, it certainly would have been easier, but
but the most important thing was that I beg your pardon, and don't worry, I'll finish off now because you know what I'm like. I can rabbit, as we call it in London, forever.
That's what we're here for.
but the most important thing is that when you did get in the car, is that I do feel that everybody knew that there was nothing left, So they had it because I was so desperate that if it was no testing and I've just got into a Formula 3000, now called Formula 2, and I'm against, all the big stars who were knocking on the door of F1, it's just not good enough to be nowhere. So even with a low-level team, my job was to try to shine. So finishing 7th with a car that other people weren't even qualifying, that's your win. That's your reputational win. So clearly, I would love to have been standing on the top step of the podium. But if I couldn't do that, it was the reputational win that, well, that was the result of it. My heart wasn't thinking, I want reputational win. My heart was to try and bite through a steering wheel and do everything I possibly could because I wanted to go fast. That was in me, and that's what I absolutely live for.
Yeah, I think there's a purity to that, of course, and that's probably the thing that I read that your first time driving, you went and did some laps or a school at Brands Hatch, and that's what sort of
Yes.
kicked everything off.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
You hadn't done any racing, you hadn't done any karting.
Only on the road.
Yeah, so exactly. Statute of limitations, you're fine. But I mean, again, I think similarly to you, I had a similar thing. Instead of working on oil rigs, by the way, my dad's best friend, when I grew up in England, and my dad's best friend, I called him Uncle Ralph, but he was on oil rigs, and he was
I know him.
Yeah, exactly. Uncle Ralph. Everyone knows Uncle Ralph. But he worked there on oil rigs for 20, 30 years, and he lived in Newcastle. And we used to go up and visit him all the time. And just so anyone doesn't know, those North Sea oil rig guys are just notorious. It's like the toughest people because the weather, the conditions, it's horrendous. And so some of the toughest people you'll ever meet have spent time on these oil rigs. And they're brawlers and fighters and just tenacious people, and he was like that too. So I can kind of relate to that end of it. And for me, like I worked a construction job to fund my first racing. So I worked a summer as a laborer working construction and worked my way up, and eventually I was an assistant superintendent and a superintendent. But that's how I got my money. And then I went to Europe to the Winfield School and entered their competition. So, it's all, and I was 24, by the way. So, a lot of this, I think it's a cool story because I think in racing, so many people, obviously, you focus on the people that are at the very top and the ones that are winning. And rightfully so, they get all the press. I mean, it is motorsports. It is about racing and about results. But you bring up this great point about finishing seventh in a car that shouldn't be there. And like, there's great stories like that in motorsports. And that's how, you have the reputation that you have, even though, you're not a multi-time world champion in Formula One. You're still very highly thought of in motorsports as a driver, certainly as a character. and a lot of that comes from, to use the boxing analogies one more time, you're punching way above your weight. You're in a car that shouldn't even be on the grid, and you're passing and in front of people and racing with people that are in much, much better cars, much better prepped cars. And the cool thing is like, while the media doesn't necessarily notice that sort of thing, they focus on the top three really in every race. But the people in the industry do know, and that's how you can kind of keep going.
Yeah, but something actually, and I'd like to pay people their due as we go through this chat. Actually, it was very much the other way around with me. The motor racing media were hugely on side.
That's cool.
And it really was. And they pretty much always were. So I'll always remember that. It's quite touching for me that so many people actually really did believe in me, because you can stand there just howling at the moon saying, I'm quick, give me a chance and everything else. But goodness gracious, it means the world when people who are quite respected actually put an arm around you and just say, listen, we think you've got something. And you just go, I'm not a complete idiot then, maybe a bit of an idiot, but not a complete idiot, And it really does mean the world. I don't know. You mentioned the rigs and the mentality out there. I probably am, let's say, a bit of a hard nut when it comes to, knocks, falling over, failures, recovering from them, all that kind of stuff, and my attitude to it as well. But a complete softie when somebody does put their arm around you and just say, come on, son. And I just go, oh, thank you very much, So it does actually mean the world to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's really cool. And that's what I was saying, like they're within the industry, there are people that do look for those stories. Like they see that car in seventh that shouldn't be in seventh. And you do get that recognition around the pit lane. And certainly I think of people on our side of the pond, guys like Jeremy Shaw, who's who does the Team USA every year for the Formula Ford Festival at Brands Hatch. And he's one of those guys where he'll find like, he does his stories as a journalist, not usually on the fast guy, but the guy that's up where he shouldn't be. So it's kind of cool.
Jeremy was exactly one of those people. Jeremy
Exactly.
Shaw and Jonathan Ingram in
Jonathan
America.
Ingram, yeah.
As soon as I came to the States, they were immediately on side with me,
Mm-hmm.
and I recognized that I loved racing in America. Absolutely loved it because I actually stood a chance, even though we were with a really small team and we were against the works Jaguars, the works Nissans, the works Toyotas, the works Porsches. They were spending serious dough. Our little Spice Chevy is that I think that there were plenty of times where I had the advantage on them of the throttle response on the Chevy. Now, clearly, of course, they're all turboed. So, if you get to somewhere like Portland, this bye, see you in the bar after, they're coming past you like that. But other places, I was able to make it up because I was quite literally treating the bloody thing like a cart. But with the throttle response, back then, I don't think the turbos were quite as nimble as they became. And the other thing was, I knew I was being considered for Formula One in a few different places. So, I was in my element, Paul. Yeah. And I just loved riding in the States. And I beg your pardon, but just expanding from what you're saying about these journalists, I found an immediate home there. Cool. A tight little team who totally believed in me. And the journalists, they really made me feel it was all worth it. And the more they made me feel it was worth it, I was finding another level. And I absolutely knew that. I knew really I was finding quite big levels in Formula 3000, to be honest, because if one were to look at my entire career, even by Formula 3000, I really hadn't done very many races. Season of Formula Ford, a bit of a season in Formula Ford, which wasn't very good at all. 1985 was a disaster, absolute disaster. Then F3 in 86, and then moving toward 3000. So from what should be a seasoned professional, I still wasn't very far away from having come off the street, and I'm now in the level just below F1. But it started really clicking by then. The more power I had, the more interested I was. The faster I could go, the more interested I could, because I felt it could make a difference. I felt I could make more of a difference with stuff that had more power, more speed. Mm-hmm. But I can't remember what the question was, but that was the answer.
No, I liked all of that. It was it's all. And by the way, I feel the same way. I'm much more at home. I feel much more alive, much more engaged in a high horsepower car. I think they're just, and to your point, I think that almost sums it up really succinctly, perfectly. I feel I can make more of a difference in a high horsepower car. And I just enjoy driving something that's got more downforce, more grip, and more power. It's just more engaging, isn't it? And more exciting to drive. And to those,
the other thing is that, but this really is kind of, it's slightly big-headed in a way. Well, actually, it's not. I have to try and qualify this and think it through. But I honestly, this might sound really stupid. Well, actually, it doesn't. I believed I was a Formula One driver who wasn't there yet. Sure. At every step.
Yes.
But I actually did. I actually did.
Yeah.
So the closer I was getting to it, the more I felt I was making progress, and the more interest the whole thing had for me. That was, and that excitement of then beginning to knock on the door of, because by the time I don't know if you know, but by the time we was in 3000, life was getting a little bit rough, to be quite frank. There were so many of us who were desperate to get into F1, and a lot of people were getting hurt. It was getting a little bit punchy out there. But that's how it goes. But that was the even more excitement for me going. I know F1 teams are talking about me. They'd already approached me, but I didn't have any kind. And believe me, they were talking small money, but I had nothing.
Right.
Absolutely nothing. I mean, my house was already signed over to get me into Formula 3000 because I'd made, believe it or not, Paul, I'd made some pretty good money when I was in Formula 3. I actually did. I
That's
got
cool.
so many sponsors. I bought a property. With the property, I renovated it, did that up, sold that, bought another one, much bigger place, renovated that. Suddenly, I've got really meaningful equity. And then industry fell over. There was no sponsorship to take me to 3000. I went, okay. And we'd just started a family at the time. And I just said, okay, right, see you later. Bye to the house. That got me into 3000 with a back of the grid team. That wasn't front of the grid. That was just to get in 3000. But it worked. It paid off.
Yeah, it's so difficult to sustain momentum. And so you have to do, if you can't just simply write a check. You've got to figure out a way to keep that momentum going because they'll just forget about you, right? It won't take long. And you won't be the darling of the insider press for Formula 3000 anymore. They'll move on to someone who is there.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah. That's if there's momentum, you got to find every way possible to carry it through. I mean, the number one thing I didn't want to be doing is that I didn't want to be leaning against the bar, having a beer with some people, just saying, I could have been a racing driver, but I didn't have the money. So that was impossible for me to think of. And that's why absolutely everything went into forging some kind of opportunity. So recognizing an opportunity or creating an opportunity, doing pretty much a lot of stupid things to make sure that I got there. And I mean, do you know the passion involved to make that happen? Really, you've got to be passionate. Yeah. You've got to want this at all costs to live like that.
Yeah, I think when you said you had this belief that you should be in a Formula One car, that will drive it all, right? And will push you to take that last lap pass or to keep pushing out of the car to make sure you're in the seat. It doesn't matter. It's all the same. It's a means to an end. Let me ask you a question, a little bit off topic, but I'm just curious, since you came in right into Formula Ford and you did so well in Formula Ford, you were quick right away, which is again, a lot of people try, very few are ever quick right away.
Yeah, but stupid, but yeah.
Yeah. Brave, right? But how did you develop your racecraft, passing people, managing the car, all of that? Did you do that in that first season on the fly?
Yeah, pretty much. But there were a whole bunch of mistakes. Don't worry, there really were. But yeah, I couldn't do much about that because there was, nowhere else to really practice. But I kind of there's a lot. I mean, I was watching TV, I was seeing things, but obviously inside the car is a completely different thing. But it just seemed to be that I was looking at this thinking I seem to be quite good, and then it's a question of concentrating. And after a while of being in the sport, thinking, well, actually, I better be bloody good because I can't do anything else now. That's it. You've just nailed your colours to the mast here, so you better end up being quite good at this, otherwise you're stuffed.
Right.
But there was, but as I say, honestly, Paul, there was a whole bunch of mistakes. I caved the thing in testing a bunch of times. I really do. So I wish I could turn around and say, no, it was an absolute. I think there was a lot of natural ability. I really do.
Yes.
But just because you got that doesn't mean to say you're home and dry. You need to shave off the edges. Yeah. And it did take me a while. Cracking. Yeah. I was about to say it took me a while to do that. I was still making mistakes in Formula 3. I made some in 3000, made some mistakes. I never finished making mistakes, believe me. But maybe not not such bad ones, although there were a couple.
Yeah, I know. I mean, but that's always it. And to your point, you said early on, like I've never done a perfect lap, and in my opinion, no one ever has, and no one ever will. We get close, but you can always go into diminishing return and find something you could do better. Especially with data these days. So that stuff all really rings true. And I think like that school of hard knocks, maybe it's that attitude from the oil rigs that you took into the car, where your Rocky analogies, but that mindset is a good mindset, in motorsports, as long as, again, you're not crashing the car to such a point that you're either hurting yourself or not able to continue as a result of it. But if you've got the common sense to apply that mindset carefully so that you stay on the road and win races and have generally good results, then that's how you build a reputation as a driver.
Well, I did manage to hurt myself a couple of times because after winning the championship, the first race of actually it was the second race of the following year, I went airborne and that broke my back.
Wow.
That was a good crash. Yeah, that was a good one.
That
was
was
at
in a
Alton
Ford?
Park.
It was in a Formula Ford.
Formula Ford, yeah. I was testing the Van Diemen 84 to destruction. That was in the second race of the year. But that race at Alton Park, that crash was so big, they actually stopped the race at Silverstone. That's how big that crash was.
There were pieces that showed up on Hanger Straight.
Yeah. I was on West Midlands Airport radar for a little while. That's how high it went,
Exactly.
But that
I
was
remember my days in Formula Ford were like that too, where I remember Watkins Glen heading into the turn 5 before they had the chicane there, and just seeing a flash in my mirror, and it was a car that just had vaulted over the car behind me and was flying over me, and just landed in front of me already in pieces and into the guardrail. But the thing, the amount of air, it must have flown for 150 feet in the air, not high but distance.
Right over where was that, Paul? Where was that chicane at Watkins Glen? There's a reason for asking this.
So the chicane is right before the sort of the turn. It used to be turn 5, but basically you have turn 1, you go through the S's, and then there's a straightaway.
Yeah. And then there's a downhill right, isn't there?
A downhill parabolic right. And they put the chicane in right there. And actually, it was from a friend of mine.
Tommy?
Crashed there, Tommy Kendall.
Yeah, it's from Tommy's crash, yeah?
Yes. So
Tommy crashed after, because that's why I was asking, actually, because my first race was at Ohio in the States. I won that, but that was in the Camel Lights. And then they put me in the GTP, and in qualifying, we were clearly off the turbos there, but in the race it rained. So I took the lead on lap 3 and then pulled away from everybody. And it's like hadn't been done. But I love the Watkins Glen circuit. But I was trying to remember where that chicane was. And then while we were talking, suddenly I thought, no, that came in after Tommy's crash, because Tommy got really hurt there, didn't he?
Yes, he did. And then there was another crash just afterwards where someone was also either seriously hurt or killed. I can't remember, but it was the 2 crashes, and then they put the chicane in.
Okay, right. Okay, because okay. You know something? I think I raced in Watkins Glen in '97 in a small German car, the URD. They never had a T car, maybe for obvious reasons if you put the T and the URD together. But and I don't remember if I just don't remember if they had the chicane there. But anyway, I'm sorry, I've steered you off in a different direction.
It would have been
there.
Say
hi to Tommy for me.
Yeah, I will. I'm planning on having him on as a guest, actually. So at some point I'll have him on. But he's also a great ambassador for motorsports. He understands and speaks really well and all of that good stuff. So that's all amazing. And so you just sort of hopped around the whole time. How did you end up coming to the States and racing? How did that all start?
I had a great friend of mine who I drove for in 3000, Roger Cowman. This is what I'm saying about being against Johnny, Jean Alesi, everybody else. He was running in 3000 out of his back garden, So, And what people didn't realize was that other teams were giving me tires, other teams were giving me fuel. There was a lot of people inside just trying to find some way to keep me on the track. And so we had a couple of, super results considering what we had, but that was it. But he was friends with a guy called Julian Randalls, and Julian ran the Spice USA team. And Julian knew what I was doing, and that was it. And just said, "Look, can we have Perry come out and drive the Camel Lights car, the Spice Junior car?" So I did that with a Mexican driver called Thomas Lopez, real character actually. Anyway, when we're at a bar one day, I'll tell you the full story about this, but this isn't for this podcast, okay? But we won the race. Believe me, we shouldn't have done. And then it's because of what I was doing in that. They said, we want you to get in the GTP, and that was it. I went terribly quickly, yeah. So it kind of, but it was that opportunity thing. There was an opportunity, and it was opportunity to look pretty good, and it worked. So that was great. And then the English press, as well as Jeremy and Jonathan out in the States, the English press were really doing an awful lot to highlight what I was doing in America, to keep that before the F1 teams as well. So, but I was knocking on by then. This was 1990, and I was 29. So Max Verstappen was in F1 at like 17.
Yes, yeah.
He had an advantage. His mother had him 2 weeks early, just to get him on the track earlier. That is the kind of advantages that family went to.
And she was a karting champion as well.
Yeah, there you go. They didn't do the Le Mans method. They got him cut off the umbilical cord and out of there in 3.8 seconds. It was that fast.
Yeah, it's amazing to watch the current drivers, and I still coach, and so I'm sort of still in the mix with all that. And it is amazing to see how much experience and how young they are. And you see this little 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old with this unbelievable, not only resume, but level of maturity. And you think like what you were like at that age, you're just going, holy cow, but they're so groomed. In one way, you feel a little sorry for them, like their childhood was robbed a little bit. But on the other hand, you can't but be impressed by their sheer level of professionalism and knowledge. Like they've been digging into data systems since they have them in karting now for years. They understand, everything from one end to the other, and they don't even have a learner's permit to drive on the roads yet.
Yeah, it's incredible. Oh, I think that was actually the same as Max. I don't think, I'm not clear. I'm not sure he had his road license before he came into F1. There's a story around that. Yeah. So
he has a super license, but not a road license.
Exactly.
Which is just,
it's, everything he's achieved this year has shown that, there was that kind of, you see it, that maturity, that expectation, that familiarity. This is probably why Formula One didn't phase Max when he first came into it, because he'd lived it. He'd been with Jos, his father, who's an ex-F1 driver, of course. They understood the world of motor racing. So it wasn't all like the rabbit caught in headlights. What the hell's going on? Yeah. It was completely expected. And I think that clearly, of course, that is such an advantage. And then, of course, you've had that advantage, you've had that opportunity. You still need to turn it on.
Yeah.
And what we've seen him is just mature into, we recognized he was super talented as soon as he came into F1. But what we've seen is this constant evolution. He's just got better and better and better. Yeah. And we've got maybe one of the best ever F1 drivers in perhaps the best ever F1 car, with a team that's just not making mistakes.
Exactly.
So you put that little package together, the rest are in trouble.
It's a nightmare.
Yeah, absolutely.
For everyone else, No, it has been impressive. I mean, he did come in like that, and you get a few that do. I mean, I always look back. You think of like how cunning and clever Senna was when he was doing his first original F1 tests, for Tolman, and the cars that he drove and how he drove them and under the conditions he drove them. He was just very careful at all times. And then you look at,
Careful.
Lewis's first year in Formula
Sorry, did
One.
you say Ayrton was careful?
Well, I mean, he was careful out of the car. He was where he was so thoughtful about every time he got in the car in trying to make the right impression, making sure the conditions were met, that he would excel when he was in the car. He was just as crafty out of the car as he was aggressive in the car. And
It's
in
not
my
so I wouldn't have personally noticed that about him, to be honest. I mean, sorry, I'll just use this as a very
I
quick
love it. Go.
example. The moment I kicked off in motor racing, I didn't go skiing again, because I didn't want to be hurt outside the car, which with
Right.
my level of skiing ability was going to happen. It was, that was it. So being careful was a question of just isolating unnecessary risk not associated with what you do. So if one were to sadly get really badly hurt inside a race car, and unfortunately that kind of does come with the territory if it goes wrong a little bit, but it would have been really dumb, in my opinion, to have
Yeah.
got hurt outside. So maybe if that's what you're referring to with Elton, but with regard to his on track craft, the bloke was just flat out, and
No,
the
he was. Yeah.
equalizer being the rain, that's where he had that opportunity, which he was robbed of, in my personal opinion, and I'm not alone in saying that, at Monaco, where he actually, that race should have been, it was, the checker flag was thrown too early,
Yes.
and I
Yes.
think that was political,
Yes. Of
and he
course it
should have
was.
won that race at Monaco
Yeah.
in the Tolman,
Yes.
but that was sheer genius. The funny thing is, there was actually somebody down in the pack who was
Stefan
actually even
Belloff.
faster,
Stefan
Stefan
Belloff.
Belloff.
Yep.
Stefan was even faster in the
Yep.
Tyrrell coming through, But yeah, so Ayrton made his mark very, very quickly. I mean, those of us inside, coming through, because Ayrton was in kind of like one or two school years above me and Damon and Johnny and Martin and Mark and everything. Not Martin, sorry. Martin Donnelly, yeah. So he was
Yep.
kind of a bit ahead of us.
Yes.
But we were racing on the same tracks at the same weekend as Ayrton.
Yep.
So we were pretty familiar with what Ayrton was capable of, from Formula Ford, from Formula 2000, from F3. That was the route Ayrton took. But then from F3, went straight into F1, as did Martin Brundle.
Yeah. Yeah. I was talking about, like, if you talk to the test drivers for those teams that sort of handled his initial tests that were there on the day, and sort of how careful, what I was referring to was sort of how he set the thing up for success before he got in the car. And then, yeah, once he was in the car, then it was this utter self-belief that he had in himself and his ability. And he drove the car, 100% every time he got in the car. And that was sort of the thing that people cherish and love about that man.
I think from my understanding, one of Ayrton's, key abilities, and you like to think all racing drivers have this to a degree, but maybe Ayrton articulated it even better and even more precisely, was to work with the engineers to try to describe exactly what's going on at each point of the circuit. And there seemed to be, people were terribly impressed with the level he was able to go to.
Yeah.
I'm not clear that either maybe it was a lack of ability or just a sheer lack of patience, but I would kind of condense stuff down and just say, look, this is a problem here, this is a problem there, this is a problem there. And as soon as we got into a conversation about maybe we should use a packer inside the suspension on the left front, and go, oh, give me a break. Just look at the major stuff. We are bored. This is what we need to do. Whereas Ayrton probably would have sat there for 3.5 hours straight describing how the spring works, and that's, but we've all got different personalities there.
Yes.
You don't have to completely be like that to win the world championship. Maybe you did to be at the center, but
no, there's certainly drivers that have done it that have no knowledge of the car from an engineering perspective at all. They just get in and drive. I run across those drivers all the time, and
I think
I'm shocked at how quick they are.
Yeah, but by the time you're in F1, you've got to have an understanding, because otherwise you're not going to be leading the engineering team whatsoever. And there's only so much you can do to drive at 100% before you've got to make the car faster. And unless you're able to relay that and speak with the engineers, and then understand some of what they have done, and then precisely actually then discuss, because obviously, I'm kind of pre-data boy to a large degree. We used to do it by telegram. We've got to then turn around and say, actually, that has made, I can just feel a tiny bit more bite, or actually it's made it a bit worse. Or so you've got all the way through, even from the 60s, they would have been working with the engineers to just say they can feel the difference.
Yeah.
And anybody who's got to F1 Paul will have had that skill, but then of course you do have different levels of that skill from different people. Nicky was a great example of somebody who could engineer the socks off something,
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very, very different levels there. And, they just backfill, the engineering side will just backfill. I like I said, I know guys that are driving at a very high level now that don't have a lot of knowledge of that vehicle, but they do have engineers that they can communicate with almost down to grunts, and the engineer goes, "Oh, okay, I know what to do." They'll take it from there. Yeah, exactly. Well, really looking at the data, you can even with data, you can pull from data, like if a driver's confident or not by how they're attacking. So if the engineer has that level of acumen from the engineering side, they can judge driver confidence by what they're seeing as data. And without even
but the driver could, but hang on a second, the driver confidence might be because they're driving a donkey of a car.
I know. It's not a simple puzzle. It's not simple.
It's like, I mean, we still hear it all the time on F1. Is that with all the technology, the funding, the brilliance of all the drivers or most of the drivers in F1, and we're still hearing drivers coming and saying, "I'm sorry, but I haven't got any confidence." I mean, it's a relative term, of course, because they're understandably complaining about the last half second, saying they haven't got any confidence in it, or that's it. But it is all these things that affects the psyche, and they're trying to push all the time. I mean, F1 nowadays. I mean, if I was even capable of driving these cars, which I'll guarantee you, if you put me in Lewis Hamilton's car and left me for 3 days with new tires and at the same circuit and the same conditions, and if my body would take it, which it wouldn't, but if I ended up on the third day and there's my fastest lap with all my experience and background, he'd turn up, he'd do a warm-up lap and then pull my arms and legs off on his first lap, because those racing drivers, they're here and now. This is what they do. They're light bulbs of speed. Screw them in and they think speed, and you've got it. So they are absolutely attuned to everything that's going on. But by the same token, I'm not clear F1 nowadays. I still watch it. I'm on the edge of my seat when it starts. I'm going, wow, the lights are off. That's it. But I'm not really clear nowadays. It would have been for me because it's so engineering led, and it is. They just don't seem to have any time whatsoever. There's a bunch of things that everybody involved is ultra professional. It's everything has been
almost to a fault.
That's kind of how I think. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things which I understand them technically, I really do, but I'm not on side with it, because these steering wheels that can make all the adjustments with the toggle switch and the default and then this, and you press the button and then who cares? Give them a radio. If they're lucky, give them a drinks bottle. That's it. Who cares? Just send them off with a great big engine and let them go for it.
Wouldn't that be marvelous? Yeah.
That's how I think.
Remember the A1 GP where they sort of tried to do that, not too long ago. Simple car with a nice V10 and a bunch of grip and a bunch of downforce and a simple steering wheel, to your point. And it's so funny because the whole thing is so driven by the manufacturers, of course, that they're trying to use it to sort of perform another manufacturer on a technical level, because that proves that their road cars are better than the other guy's road cars. So it's sort of like how we like to focus on the drivers' championship, and they're focused on the manufacturers' championship. That's why they're in it, for bragging rights. And I know I do work with Mercedes now, and the latest Mercedes hybrid car uses a center section electric turbo system that's developed that's derived from the F1 car engines. So they're like so happy they get to say that, like we put billions into F1 and, we got this piece right here, and it's in our road cars and it makes them better. So there's just, for us though, we just want to see pure racing, and we want to see the guys going at it. But, to your point though, they're still doing it because like what you just said a moment ago before you said that, the level of it is kind of crazy now, but you were talking about how a driver that's talking about maybe a tenth or two is talking about not having confidence in the car. So it's still down to human beings. That's the cool part. And they're still trying to, and all those dials, of course, they're, it's because in the rules, they're allowed to make those adjustments, and those adjustments make the car faster. Because if you change the diff for a fast corner and a slow corner, you're eking out hundredths of a second doing that. And so, they simply do it. It's amazing when you think of like the driver load for that, when you watch them making literally some adjustment, whether it's a brake bias or a differential or whatever they may be doing, or a map, or, they can change region. There's so many adjustments in the car. They're literally making those adjustments every single corner, wherever the corner is a different type than the one that was before it, or, they're trimming it out for the straightaway. And holy cow, like I can't even imagine that sort of loading on your head. You could imagine them coming up through F3 and getting a little field and a little bit in F2, and then getting dumped into F1, and they're like, here's your steering wheel. You've got
but this is the thing for me
you could do while you're driving the car flat out the whole time. And it's amazing. I think
I'm being selfish. It's just my own it's just my own preference.
Oh, I'm the same way. I feel the same. I'm sure they would say the same thing.
Yeah, I've zero interest in this steering wheel. Sure, brake balance. That's great. That's a driver thing. Yeah, that's great. And maybe front and rear roll bar or whatever, But not all this other stuff, for goodness sake. Anyway, I'm sounding like a dinosaur, but
it's okay because we like pure racing, and I think the message of pure racing gets lost in all the technology, and so it's more difficult to realize it's just this guy in there that's trying to get the most out of this car on this lap, just as it has always been. And they're trying to manage a set of tires for a stint, just as it has always been. And they're trying to outthink and outmanipulate the other drivers, just as it has always been. Like that's still always part of motorsports. Maybe now the tires are built to degrade, and we hate that. There's things along those lines that are. But the driver's job is the driver's job. They're twirling way more things on the steering wheel, but they're trying to twirl them better than the other guys.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I just want to keep seeing, there's been talk of AI coming into F1, etc. Now, I'd rather hope that other people have got the same attitude as I do, is that I think it's really necessary for any sport to maintain the human interest in it, because we all know as humans we can screw up. So that's part of the excitement, thinking, could they mess up? Could they get their strategy wrong? That's another. But if you've got AI, you don't want to be reading on the race report before it starts. And we're predicting 97.8% possibility that Red Bull's going to win. We kind of might feel that, but we don't really need it reinforced, So, and this strategy stuff, there's a whole, if I was given a magic wand on this, which of course is never going to happen, but there's a whole bunch of things I would choose to pare back from this to make it slightly more pure. And then that would give us hopefully more of an opportunity to see the difference between absolute genius driver talent to great driver talent to maybe not so great. Because the thing is, if performance is continuously soaked up by software or other things that are doing the job for the driver, then anybody can drive to that. But the more you've got to actually feel it and work it out yourself, that comes more down to the driver, and it provides more of an opportunity for our big stars to shine even brighter and just say, look, actually, you think I'm only a tenth quicker than Matey Boy, but if we take all the bells and whistles off, I'm actually 6 tenths quicker than him. It's the
Yeah.
other stuff that's making it up. I
Yeah.
hope
Yeah.
that makes sense, and I'm not
No,
just
it does. It
ranting.
does. But they don't have traction control. They don't have ABS. They don't have stability control. I mean, ultimately, as long as those things, because you think about, I've driven cars with that, race cars with that, with those systems, and as soon as you can just pin the throttle when you come out of the corner, and the traction control does the job. As soon as you can mash the brake pedal, and there's no chance of any sort of significant lockup, then all of that, the skill ebbs because you lose that granular feel for those controls.
Yeah.
And so F1, to its credit, with all the technology that it has, still doesn't have traction control, still doesn't have stability control or ABS. So the drivers are still driving. You look at, MotoGP, for example, where they go in and out, like they allow traction control some eras, and then they put it away again other eras, and it's very different then, and different riders in that case will sort of jump up, to your point, and be successful, where when those systems weren't allowed, they weren't successful. So
No, I agree.
as long
Yeah.
as we can keep the drivers driving, the riders riding, then we kind of always know who the best are, and then we still wait for a good wet race when the powertrain that has is a little more slippery or has 20, 30 more horsepower than the other powertrain doesn't
I
make a
revert
difference
it
anymore.
to. I mean, the real life case with me, Paul, is that when unfortunately, not always driving the best kit going, etc. But when it rained,
Yes.
then I actually was
Game
able to
on.
do something
Yeah.
pretty good,
Yeah.
and that's kind of, I think that the opportunity to show that in the rain definitely helped me. It helped me get some recognition and helped me get more support and people believing in me because if we had been soaked up with electronics, then I wouldn't have been able to show that because the others would have had that, and so there's no difference. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I used to, whenever I was in a car that wasn't great, I always prayed for rain
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I knew I would have a shot. The driver can make a difference if it's wet, and so all that's really cool. So that's that. I mean, it's fantastic that you've had all of those experiences. I think it's amazing that you got as far as you did, and you were talking about a part of this that was making it difficult for you, and that was your era was full of really good drivers. And as a matter of fact,
Yeah, damn them.
you're friends with all of them now, aren't you? You guys are kind of
Yeah,
known as this little rat pack
yeah.
of the sort of the 90s era in Great Britain, where they were, list them off. I mean, we've got Damon Hill, world champion, right? You got like Martin Donnelly, he was in there, wasn't he? Mark Blundell, Johnny Herbert. Who am I
Julian
missing?
Bailey. Julian
Julian
Bailey.
Julian Bailey, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
And then,
Martin
so
Brundle.
well, that was our central rat pack because us lot come from Formula Ford, Formula 3, Formula 3000 all together. And so, I mean, we were friends during, even though we were racing against each other, we were all friends, so our kids all know the other kids, and the wives knew the wives, and that was it. So it was a bit of a throwback to the 60s type thing, that
Yeah,
kind
it
of
was. Yeah, yeah.
mentality that we had. But quite clearly on track, then none of us was stupid, but it was hard. But there were some donuts out there, but not us lot. It's like, yeah, it was hard, but that was, not dumb. But yeah, we've all maintained this friendship. And in actual fact, is it next week? It's the 7th that is our next Rat Pack lunch. So yeah, so that's good. But so there was that original 6 of us. Then we adopted Marty Brundle fairly soon afterward to come along. And then my dear friend Johnny Dumfries, who passed away a little while back. And then Jonathan Palmer's come on board. Derek Warwick's been with us for a long time. So we've eked it out a little bit more. Dave Brabham comes to when he can with us a lot. So it's just a close collection of all pals that have raced together, and we all know each other very well. So, and then each year the older we get, the faster we were.
Well, and you probably give each other a little bit more rope to go each time. You're like, it's fine. You're getting old. You can
Yeah,
tell the
exactly.
story that way. I won't call you out like I would have 10 years ago. I'll let you have it this time.
I know we still call each other out, believe me.
I was just I mentioned to you when we were chatting prior to the podcast here when I was setting this up, but I was just in Vegas at the Grand Prix where I got to stunt double for Lewis Hamilton, by the way. So I
Yeah,
got
I know. I heard that. Yeah.
that was kind of, I put that, it's right up there with the Stig and with my book. And it's like I've doubled for Lewis Hamilton driving around the track. But David Coulthard was out for that event, and I've never met David, but obviously he's very well known through his racing and also of course his now he's a commentator, so he's very well known through that. But David, I mentioned you, and I didn't tell you his exact response. I want to say it now. He's like, "Oh, that Perry, he's a crazy bastard." That was what he said.
Well, actually, David's joining us on the 7th in London.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
So it's
good.
yeah. I've got a lot of time for David, but there was a situation between me and David at Williams because after I finished my year in Formula One, which was an unmitigated disaster.
Yeah.
You probably know the story. Tiny little team. We should probably have never been out there on the grid. We had it completely covered. We weren't just slow. We were also dangerous. I mean, my car was tight fitting, long, all in black. All we needed was 4 brass handles around the side. It was going to save time burying me, I'll tell you, right? But we were. I mean, that was heartbreaking to be in there. But then there was just this possible chance in '93 of getting the test drive because Damon had now got the drive because Nigel Mansell had won the world championship for Williams. Damon was test driver. Damon didn't stand a chance in the Brabham he was driving, like me, at the back of the grid. We were nowhere.
Yeah.
But Nigel threw the toys out the pram at the end of the year for reasons best known to him. It was so late in the year, Williams didn't have another top driver sign. But we've got this test driver who's been doing a blimmin' good job. So Damon got that drive and, of course, strangled it, both hands, this is my chance.
Yes, yes.
But he left the test driver role open at Williams. So, of course, I'm looking, thinking, I want that. But, of course, so does Dave Coulthard, And anyway, cut a long story short, Dave got the drive, probably rightly so, 10 years younger, very quick, much better looking than me, which isn't a high bar to pass, to be quite frank. But when I wrote my book, I can't use the language that I'd say, but in my book, I sent one to Dave and I said, "Dear Dave, thanks for my career. You lots of love, pal." So I sent it through to him. So when he wrote his book, he sent one through to me saying, "Dear pal, I owe it all to you. Lots of love, Dave." And I thought that was, and I like that banter, that kind of, I've
we can
always
all laugh
liked
about
that.
it now.
Yeah. Funny enough, he tells the story and he still laughs harder than I do about it. But
yeah, exactly. Bastard. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I'm always of the ilk. It's sort of like you said this earlier when you were saying when someone got a ride, you congratulated them. I always felt the same way. If they were worthy, if they could get it done in a car, if I respected them as a driver and they got a seat, I was always the first to tell them, "Great job," and good luck, and go get them. All of that. I was never like one of those people that was just universally bitter or hated everyone else that drove a race car because I had to. It's like in the race, it's different. I'm going to pass them. If I can pass them, I'm going by them. I don't care how much I like him or not like him. It's just that's racing. That's different. But out of the car, I was always very respectful of them, especially if I respected how they drove the car. And I think that's cool. And it lets you keep those friendships, especially as we get older. They're some of the best friends we have because I think they relate to our experiences maybe better than anyone else.
I agree with that.
They've been
I
through a
agree with
lot of the
that.
same. Because it is
Yeah.
motorsports is a crazy thing. I mean, it's a crazy thing. I think if people really understood what it was like, I was thinking about this too, and I think it was driven by we were talking. I think it was it was one of the commentators in the Vegas race actually, and just talking about how crazy racing is. They were talking about how athletic the drivers are and how fit they need to be, and you're trying to equate it to another sport. And the thing about motorsports is it's done like in Formula One, done on this Olympic level. When you think about like how much training these guys have to do and how fit they are and how much money is invested in them and their physical fitness, their mental abilities, all of these things, like all of it is so honed down to your point that it's way too much. But then you have this car. It's not like, you're Usain Bolt trying to run the 100-yard, dash faster than anyone in the world, and you're out training every day for that. But it's like you're doing that as a human being to be in the car. But then on the other side, the tool, the race car, is this incredibly complex thing that $150 million officially is being spent on to field these two cars with 1,000 engineers in a lot of the big teams' cases for two cars. It's like this crazy endeavor that motorsports is. And then you can go all the way down to F3 or even Formula 4 these days and think about like how sophisticated any form of motorsports is these days relative to like when you and I were racing in Formula 4. And you were talking about a F3000 team that was done out of a guy's, garage in his backyard, like that.
I feel that it was a question of, when it comes to the fitness side of stuff, is that I was quite aware of the fitness, because if you're going to be able to try to keep that level of focus and strength, because back then we didn't have the power steering, so the downforce was making the car an awful lot heavier to steer, and in the wrong car that could actually be really bloody difficult. So I was always keen on the fitness side of things, and so I was actually very fit, and I actually was also very strong. Now, there's a reason for mentioning this, is that you can bet your bottom dollar that all of the drivers on the grid today are fitter again than I ever was.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not clear about the strength thing, because we had to be strong shoulder and arms wise to steer these things. I mean, if you ever meet Nigel Mansell, you shake hands with Nigel, and if you're lucky, the blood returns to your fingers inside 4 days. It's like he's incredibly strong. So there was that kind of upper body strength thing going on. But in the pursuit of excellence and performance, it's exactly the same as cars. So they all have the right trainers, the right nutritionists, the right psychologists, the right this. So they've turned these drivers, they're exploiting correctly any performance that's inside them, from an engineering position, every bit as much as the car.
Yes.
Once again, it kind of goes into, for me as a character personally, it would have been slightly overkill, because there would have been so much to do. I think it personally would have burnt my fire out for the enjoyment of wanting to do it, because I don't like being told what to do on every single level all the time. The engineers in F1 nowadays, in my opinion, are predominantly telling the drivers how they have to drive. Now, you understand that because they understand the flow and the position and the angle that the car has to present in order to keep the downforce, the optimum downforce all the time. But crikey, this is like, some of it's like painting by numbers. And you're going, oh, but anyway, it is how it is now. Yeah. But it's one of those areas that, again, probably wouldn't have been completely for me. But I beg your pardon, I've gone around the houses,
but it's true,
going to that fitness thing.
But it's true, because you would have been, if you had come up through karting, you would have been groomed into that system as a driver today. That you would, because you'll get a micron dash on your kart, that has, you're looking at data, you're getting into engineering now at the Formula 4 level. So a race car driver
But,
is a different product than it was, back in
but you
your
know
day.
something, Paul? Do you mind me? Do you mind me leading? But while we're having a chat, as we were set out to do, but that does lead me to something. Is that some people make the mistake of thinking because ABC was double quick in a car, and then his career stopped, that he would automatically have come through if he'd been able to come through, and financially or whatever the
Yeah.
score is, or with the right team. Do you know something? That's not always the case, because I came across some really, really good people in Formula Ford, and it absolutely did not suit them in Formula 3.
Hmm.
I mean, you really could see it.
At
And
every
then,
step you see that. I think you see guys that excel at one thing and then
yeah,
don't adapt. They just don't feel comfortable. Sometimes they're intimidated. I've heard of guys going to Indy and doing a lap around the Indy Oval, thinking like that was their dream, and then getting out of the car going, "That's crazy." No, and
oh,
not
really, yeah,
yeah, and just not doing it. So there's several people that have done that, but you would see that it not quite as profoundly as I did one session, I stopped, but they would suddenly be lackluster at that next level, where at the prior level they were a top runner.
yeah,
And basically
sure,
that sort of to your point where we were chatting about how we like high horsepower, high downforce cars. Some people don't like that. That
yeah,
everything's coming out
absolutely,
too quick, and they're like, they're just
yeah.
they kind of like a certain pace, and they excel at that.
It
Maybe
does make,
it's like some
but you,
chess players are really good at chess, but they're terrible at speed chess. They don't like
yeah.
playing the game quickly. They like to play it thoughtfully.
No,
So
I'm actually great at speed chess.
there you go.
Really, really good. Now I'm really fast. It's just that I'm rubbish at chess, but at least the game's over quickly.
Yeah, I can knock my pieces over quicker than anyone.
It's like, oh look, I'm out. Is that what you say when you're out of chess? Yeah,
Did I
that's it.
win?
Yeah. So anyway, but I mean, I know you've been around the block coming through, and I've always been a bit of a fan, actually, Paul, of how you've articulated the process of driving, because we've talked about in the past. I think that you've really, in a kind of a succinct way, rather than over mathing it all the way through,
Well, yeah.
you've been able to describe maybe some of the easier to grasp things, which I'll guarantee you, I would never have been able to describe how you describe stuff.
Well, thank
It's
you.
just not, it's not part of my makeup. But congratulations on Optimum Drive, mate, because I think you've done a super job there.
Well, I really appreciate that. And I think for me, like it's not like some magical thing that I have. It was just, yeah, all right, the check's coming. I get it. But it was all that, I worked the Skip Barber School, the Jim Russell School, Audi Sports Car Experience, AMG Academy now, a Mitsubishi School. I've taught thousands and thousands of people, and every time you teach someone, you learn a little bit about yourself, in a way. And all of that experience just are, to your point, like articulating driving on a daily basis,
Yeah.
and then seeing ways you can say it that resonate with people, and then seeing ways you can say it that don't resonate with people. And eventually, just 30 years of that, you hone in on a reasonably efficient, effective process, which is why the book happened. It was just like,
Yeah.
no one's ever really talked about it this way, so I'm going to talk about it this way. And to your point, very specifically, no math, because we're rubbish at it.
Well, but it's not just that, but it's just not translatable. And I think the art of writing your kind of book, which, as I've said, isn't in me, is to try and get to the low hanging fruit and keep engagement. But something that's not, if you overwrite all this stuff, it's boring. You've got to have something that people can remember, easy to feed in lessons to adopt. That's pretty much it, because I mean, how you've come through all these training things, I just, your level of tuition, understanding, patience, you're in a different sphere to me, because I just don't have that level of patience with people. It's just, I don't, that's my Stig thing coming through. It's that Well, okay, see ya. That's it.
Yeah, I really, to this day, I love taking someone that has never driven around a track quickly in their lives, scared of it, thinks it's crazy, but they happen to be there. And by the end of the day, I've converted them into an enthusiast and someone that's kind of like now appreciates what we were just talking about, the athleticism, the mental discipline, and all those things that are required to be a racing driver. And they see then, oh, that's what it is, because it's just this, it's kind of to what I was saying a moment ago. It is pretty incredible. And you and I were chatting a little bit about Pikes Peak, before we went live here. But it's just funny they let us do it. Like, if they realize what racing was like it is truly like gladiator school. Like it's the modern version of that. You remember, I don't know if you remember the quote from Ernest Hemingway, but he said there's three sports basically. It's bullfighting, mountaineering, and racing cars, because there's real skin in the game. And it's funny, like they still let us race cars, and then they let us race cars on this incredibly professional level where it could be all the way up to Formula One. But you realize, like, in the car, the intensity of this, that's why they say it's better than any drug, right? It's incredible to be in a car in a race. And then if you lump on the fact that you've got, a team, maybe a manufacturer, a global entity relying on you to get a result for them this weekend because they've invested an amount of money that you can't even really imagine.
I've got a big imagination.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, I got this. But all of that, like, it's so special to drive a racing car. That's my point. It's an incredible privilege, honor, and at the same time, an incredible challenge to get to do it. And it's like, the last few words in my book, quoting Steve McQueen from the movie Le Mans, but racing is life. Everything else is just waiting.
Yeah. I'm gonna adapt that phrase. Racing is life. Everything else is just finding a way to pay for it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Steve McQueen had money, so he could just wait. The rest of us had to hustle the rest of the time, to try and get in that car. But it's cool. Well, I think that's a pretty cool spot to maybe end this, Perry. And I just want to say thank you so much. We've watched it in England, by the way. Perry's in England now. It's morning here in Colorado. Perry's in the UK. Where do you live, by the way?
We're in the farmland, but just outside London.
Oh, okay, cool.
So it's so I haven't got any neighbours. It's by their request. But it's lovely and close to the city, so that's it suits me just fine.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I miss it. Like I said, I grew up there. I spent most of my time here in the U.S., obviously, but I love it every chance I get to go back. And we've watched it go from being light out to being dark out in the UK now. So,
yeah,
Perry McCarthy, it has been an honor, a pleasure. You and I have talked about doing this for quite a while, so I want to thank you for taking the time, and spending some time with us. I mean, everything about your career is just pure magic. By the way, you deserve a movie. Someone needs to get the Perry McCarthy story, because I think about it, like doing the Stig part, not even that, just the motorsports part is worthy of a racing film. And then you throw the Stig in at the end, and then all the stuff you've done beyond that. You're like nodding, like, yeah, okay.
It's
amazing.
I still obviously, honest to God, see everything as an adventure. The fact that I'm not racing anymore doesn't mean that my attitude to everything else has changed. I love doing stuff, making things happen, and if there's a movie to be discussed, yeah, we should talk about it soon. I think clearly, obviously, Brad Pitt or Leonardo DiCaprio to do me justice, obviously.
Yeah, maybe Timothy Chalamet,
or maybe even Lassie. Oh, great to see you. To all your viewers and everything else, lovely to meet you. Thanks very much for your time. by Optimum Drive. He knows what he's talking about way more than I do. Listen to him.
And you know, anyone that would say something like that, obviously Perry McCarthy knows exactly what he's talking about too. Thank you again, Perry. Hopefully we'll get to chat again sometime soon. Best of luck with everything. And again, thanks so much for coming on to the Optimum Drive podcast. Take care, my friend.
Lots of love. Thanks, Paul. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Take care.